Welcome to Turn 2 Podcast. I'm with John Leffingwell. I'm Zach Wetstein. We are here to bring you all of your MLB offseason news. We're going to jump into the White Sox. They recently signed Yasmani Grandal to a 4-year, $73 million deal. How do you feel about that, John?
So I'm looking at their lineup now. With they also just re-signed Jose Abreu, which we'll talk about later. But I'm looking at that lineup with two really good power bats, along with a young bat in Yoan Moncada. Grandal last year was one of the best catchers in baseball, hitting 246 with 77 RBIs, 28 home runs on 109 walks. He did strike out quite a few times, 139 times, but his OPS was above 840 at 848. So it's really interesting to look at that power, the power in that lineup. Um, we need to see how much Eloy Jimenez progresses as well, but I think this is a really good signing for them.
So, with James McCann being eligible for arbitration, do you think this is saying that they are going to try to trade away McCann in the next year or so, or are they going to try to run with McCann and Grandal?
I think it's always helpful to have two strong catchers. You look at the Red Sox; they have a great defensive catcher in Sandy Leon and strong offensive catcher in Christian Vasquez. But this is a whole nother level. Grandal and McCann are both great. I believe both were All Stars last year. But I think they could use James McCann and trade him away to try to bolster their farm system a little bit. Their farm system is now slowly progressing into the majors, as you see the pieces from the Chris Sale trade and the pieces from other trades as well, with Yoan Moncada now being up, Eloy Jimenez now being up. They need to, Michael Kopech should be up next year, so they need to start building up that farm system again. And I think that trading away James McCann isn't going to get them a huge pull, but it could get them maybe 75, 80 overall prospect, which would really help them in the future.
So, what team do you think would want to trade for not Yasmani Grandal? Sorry, would want to trade for James McCann if they do end up trading him before able to become a free agent?
So I'm looking at a couple teams. Most prominently, I would say the Padres are up there. The Padres really did not get a lot of production from the catcher position. Um, they do have the guy from the prospect from the Indians who they traded for a little while ago, but he hasn't really gotten to his overall uh, ceiling. The big thing, another team I'm really looking at is the Angels. Mike Trout has been very adamant about trying to get more talent around him. He has never won a playoff series, and he is possibly the greatest player ever, one of the greatest players ever.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they could be someone who, with Jonathan Lucroy at catcher for them, it really he was good, but his time has come. I think it's time to bring in some young new talent to build around Mike Trout, aside from Shohei Ohtani. I think the Angels and the Padres are both very good options.
Okay, and while we're in the catcher topic right now, the Mets have been rumored to have interest in Robinson Chirinos. Many might know that they already have a catcher in Wilson Ramos. So, do you think this is a good look for them, or do you think they should shy away from Chirinos?
So Wilson Ramos is a great catcher. He had a great year, but he is often hurt, something that he has difficulty with his entire career. And Robinson Chirinos is, if nothing, a beyond serviceable backup. He uh, he keeps on seemingly going back to the Astros because I don't know, they like him there.
Yeah.
But I think that this it could be a very good fit for them. I do have concern though with both of them aren't necessarily the top defensive catchers. I think ultimately you need to have a strong defensive presence, at least in your backup, if not your starter.
Mm-hmm.
And both Chirinos and Ramos are more offensive focused.
Yeah. So we're going to stay on the Mets topic here with Zach Wheeler. He's not a Met. He's a free agent. Four teams have been rumored, and this is reported by CBS Sports, have been rumored to be interested in Zach Wheeler. The Angels, the White Sox, the Padres, and the Twins. Which team do you think can get the most out of signing Zach Wheeler?
So I'm looking again at the Angels. That once again, Mike Trout's been adamant about getting some stars. Shohei Ohtani is still dealing with getting over his Tommy John surgery, and I think it's best to make sure he gets healthy. So other than that, with Tyler Skaggs having passed away last year, they really don't have that much pitching, and I think Zach Wheeler could be a good start. Obviously, they're gonna want an ace. Zach Wheeler is
Mm-hmm.
a solid two pitcher, but I think they got to go after an ace if they can, even despite the big contract that they owe Mike Trout. Another team I'm interested in there is the Twins. The Twins actually shocked the MLB this year, winning their division, playing really well, and despite struggling in the playoffs against the Yankees, their offense looked good. Jose Barrios struggled towards the end of the season, but he was a great pitcher in the first half. I think another pitcher would really help them be able to get to that next level, maybe get past the first round and make a deeper push into the playoffs. As for the Padres, I just am confused by what they're doing. They looked like they were getting ready to rebuild,
Mm-hmm.
and then they went and they got Eric Hosmer and they got Manny Machado. Now they were in rumors for for Jacob DeGrom and Noah Syndergaard last year, so I wouldn't put it past them. If I was the Padres GM, I would stick to trying to rebuild around those young guys like Chris Paddock and Fernando Tatis.
Yeah.
But they have been surprising lately, especially with the Machado deal last year. You never know, they could swing big again this year.
I see. I'm looking at the Twins. They showed that they had a prominent offense. They had the MLB home run record for most home runs in a season, but that starting pitching and bullpen really hurt them in the end. And so I feel that they are the most interesting team to go after Zach Wheeler because he's not going to be overly expensive, and I think the Twins could benefit from that. And it's between them or the Angels because obviously the Angels, like you said, Mike Trout wants to make the playoffs. He's going to be the greatest player of all time, possibly. But to finish off, not finish off, but to continue such a great career, he wants to be in the playoffs. He wants to make the World Series. And I think going after Zach Wheeler the Angels would be showing him that they're trying to build around him with more and more pieces to make the playoffs.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's between them and the Twins. So we've been talking about. Okay, go ahead.
I'm not sleeping on the Padres. So once again, like I said, they keep on surprising. I don't think it would work, but I didn't think Manny Machado was going to be a Padre at the beginning of this season either. So you never know. You got to keep on thinking about them.
Yeah, so we've been talking about trade scenarios. So we'll go into Mookie Betts. So JD Martinez opted into his contract, and so now this has the Red Sox at a dilemma whether to trade Mookie or just play him out until his free agency. What do you think about that?
So you can't forget the Red Sox are just 1 year removed from having one of the best seasons in MLB history. They won the World Series. They won 108 games. They looked dominant in the playoffs. And that was surrounded by Mookie Betts, JD Martinez, the dominance of Chris Sale, a strong bullpen with Craig Kimbrell, and really a good supporting rotation with David Price looking good in the playoffs, Rick Porcello and Eduardo Rodriguez coming out of the bullpen. Nathan Eovaldi was a big bullpen piece there. They really looked like a complete team. They didn't lose that much going into this season with just Joe Kelly and Craig Kimbrell being the main things missing. So it really shocked me and a lot of people that the Red Sox struggled this year. And you can't just give up on that. I think what the Red Sox need to do is they need to find a way to keep both Mookie Betts and JD Martinez. It's not going to be easy, but I'm looking at trading possibly David Price. I'm looking at possibly restructuring Dustin Pedroia's contract. This team is gotten better with, even though they struggled last year, they've gotten better with Rafael Devers and Xander Bogaerts both having breakout seasons this year. With an offense with Mookie Betts, Xander Bogaerts, JD Martinez, and Rafael Devers, I think that's a scary team. David Price needs to be moved if they can to try to clear up that contract, and they need something else in the bullpen other than Brandon Workman. If they do choose to trade Mookie Betts, I personally think they should wait until midseason. See how they do this year. See at midseason where they are. Can they make a run in the playoffs? Can they bring a World Series back to Boston? If they can't, they got to move him and get what they can for him.
Yeah, and this is coming from a Yankees fan. You can throw last year in the garbage. I mean, the Red Sox still are a dangerous team. They should. I mean, last year they had what 30 or 40 games blown by the bullpen. Their offense was still great. Sometimes they slowed down a little, but that's baseball. Obviously, Chris Sale, after getting his good contract, he let down a little bit. But I don't think that you can look away from the Red Sox or look away from that offense. Their pitching is going to come back. Their bullpen looked better. I think they're at the end of the year. I'm not sure, but you're a Red Sox fan. You can mark on that. But they're a really good team, and you just can't sleep on them next year.
Yeah, I just think that when the season first started, as a Red Sox fan, I still had hope, thinking this is just a World Series hangover. A lot of teams deal with it, but the hangover got deeper and deeper into the season, and I think they did start to turn around a little bit at the end of the year. We saw about 3 quarters through the year them sweep the Yankees and Rays in succession, and they looked like, hey, maybe they're getting back into it, but they were just too far gone. They dug themselves their own grave and they couldn't climb out of it. But I think this year it's a new year. Chris Sale got shut down pretty early last year, so he's going to be rested, healthy. Uh, we'll see what happens with Mookie Betts, but I think it's in the best interest of the Boston Red Sox to keep him and find to clear up to get under that tax threshold somewhere else.
Yeah. So we'll talk about another trade scenario with Francisco Lindor. The Cleveland Indians haven't technically started rebuilding yet, but they're starting to look less and less dangerous as a team. And so people have thought that maybe they'll trade Francisco Lindor. What do you think about that?
So Francisco Lindor is, without a doubt, one of the best shortstops in baseball. He's a strong offensive player, a very good defensive player, and he's a really good clubhouse guy, which is really important in a playoff team. But you need to look at this Indians team. Corey Kluber was hurt for most, if not all, of last year. He came back for maybe 2 or 3 games, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Clevenger pitched out of his mind, keeping them in the race. They traded Trevor Bauer. They brought in Yasiel Puig and Franmil Reyes from the Reds and Padres, respectively. And I just think that it's hard to trade somebody who's such a good clubhouse guy. He's beloved by Indians fans. It's hard to trade him, but if you can get a good package for him, then I say why not. I think somebody you need to look at for that trade is the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Dodgers looked really good in the regular season, but fell off in the playoffs last year. One thing that they missed is everyone figured Corey Seager would return to normal after his Tommy John surgery, but he really struggled last year. They didn't have Manny Machado, which they had the year before. The year they lost to the Red Sox. They didn't have that stud shortstop third baseman, and I think they can get that in Francisco Lindor again. I think Corey Seager his time has come. He had a great rookie year, but injuries stacked on top of injuries. I think it's just he needs to find a different place to go play, and maybe he can turn it around. I think the big thing about this trade, though, is you can look at the Los Angeles Dodgers, Gavin Lux, as a good person for the Indians to try to get from Lindor. I'm not sure what his contract is left, but Gavin Lux is a great young player that I think the Indians could try to snag if they traded away Francisco Lindor.
Okay, so going up the Dodgers, do you think they will sign Rendon?
Anthony Rendon is a fascinating case. He really went under the radar for a very long time, but he was constantly good.
Yeah.
And then this year, finally, the Nationals make the playoffs. The Nationals win the World Series, and everyone realizes, wow, this guy has talent. And I think he knows that he's under the radar. I don't think he wants to be in a giant market like Los Angeles or New York. I can see him staying. I see him staying in Washington. I see him re-upping, keeping that team mostly together. He's created a very close bond with Juan Soto, their rookie. They're not rookie anymore. They're young phenom,
Mm-hmm.
and I think he stays because he's not a loud guy. He's a good player, and I think he stays in small market.
Okay, so you mentioned him staying with the Nationals. Another person that could possibly stay with the Nationals, do you think Steven Strasburg will stay at the Nationals?
There, I do not think he will. I think Steven Strasburg is looking for something new here. He had a great year, especially in the playoffs. You see, as he won MLB World Series MVP, he was really very good. But I just think the Nationals will not be being a smaller market team. They can't afford to get Rendon back, keep Scherzer, and get Steven Strasburg. Steven Strasburg's going to walk elsewhere for a big payday, and I could see him going somewhere in the AL East to either the Yankees, or if the Red Sox do choose to move on from Mookie Betts, getting him to add to that rotation, have two legitimate aces with Chris Sale and Steven Strasburg. I could also see him going across the NL East over to the New York Mets. Now this is interesting because everyone was kind of shocked by the Mets. Everyone was thinking they're going to trade DeGrom or they're going to trade Syndergaard, and then they ended up making a trade for Marcus Stroman. And why can't they do it again? Add to that rotation, which is such a strong point. They do have Pete Alonso, who's a stud. Michael Conforto had a good couple years ago. He had a down year last year, but you can hope that he gets back to where he was. I think that the Mets are a sneaky good team with a strong bullpen. Edwin Diaz did lead the league in saves just 2 years ago. He had a down year, but I think the Mets could be a sneaky good team and could make a big splash in free agency.
Also, speaking about Steven Strasburg, it has been reported by the New York Post that he could possibly sign by December 8th, and that would mark the beginning of the winter meetings. So he could be signing here very in the near future. So that could be a thing to look out for. We were talking about Francisco Lindor. He's a shortstop, so we'll move on to another shortstop in the free agent market, and Didi Gregorius. The Reds have been talked about looking at him and interested in Didi Gregorius. So what do you think about the Reds being interested in him?
Hey, Didi Gregorius is an interesting case. He as a Red Sox fan, someone I kind of was afraid of to face when he was on the Yankees. He's a good player. The Tommy John surgery, it's really detrimental to a lot of people's careers, and he had a down year last year, hitting just 238 in 324 at bats, 77 hits, 77 hits, 61 RBIs, 16 homers, 53 strikeouts, and his OPS was only 718. And I just think he needs to go somewhere else. The Yankees have good young talent. They didn't let injuries get to them last year. They still made a run in the playoffs. They have good young players there to come on up, and I just think that they have to. He needs to find somewhere else. I think the Reds are an interesting fit. They do have Freddie Galvis, who was traded from Toronto to them last year. He played okay. He struggled from after the trade. He had hitting just 234 in Cincy. But I think he can't be someone that you can rely on if you're trying to compete. They made a couple big moves with getting Trevor Bauer from the Indians last year, and I think they're trying to compete. They also made a surprising trade in the offseason last year where they got Alex Wood, Yasiel Puig, and Alex Wood. They since have moved on, and Matt Kemp, and they since have moved on from Puig and Kemp. But Alex Wood is still there, and he's a good player. He had a great young career, struggled with injuries, which seems to be a theme today. Struggled with injuries, but I think the Reds can be competitive. Joey Votto is going to get back to what he was. I'm convinced he's better than what he played last year. And I just think that this team is too good to have Freddie Galvis as their everyday shortstop. And I can see Didi Gregorius as a great fit in that organization.
Yeah, I don't think the Yankees will re-sign him. They have Gio Urshela at third. They have Gleyber Torres, who can move from second to shortstop. DJ will play second. Luke Voigt will play first. This not re-signing Didi creates a lot of space. The infield was kind of cluttered when healthy last year. And with Andujar coming back and then possibly playing him at the DH maybe, I think them not re-signing Didi, especially after last year, even though it came after an injury, will create up a lot of space in their infield. So, yeah, I definitely think that the Reds would be a good fit. I mean, we saw Sonny Gray get traded to the Reds from the Yankees, and he just shined in Cincy. So maybe Didi will go to Cincinnati, and he'll shine. I think his home run numbers when he's healthy will go down if he plays in Cincy. but I think he'll still play good. So, yeah, I think he'll be a good fit for Cincinnati. So let's talk about Florida. Florida in Orlando. The Orlando Magic owner is talking about wanting to bring a third team to Florida, and of course bringing that team to Orlando. What do you think about that?
I love baseball the way it is. I don't think we need another team. I think what we have is great. I get what he's trying to do there. He's trying to add to this market. I can't remember exactly, but there was reports that he had an idea for a team name already. But I think having a third team in Florida it would be detrimental to the fan bases of the Miami Marlins and the Tampa Bay Rays. The Tampa Bay Rays already struggle to fill up their stadium. They've talked about playing half of their games in Montreal. I just do not think that that Florida can support another team. They have two football teams in the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They have two basketball teams, the Orlando Magic and the Miami Heat, and they have two baseball teams. They do not need another team. They also have a couple hockey teams in uh, Florida Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning, and they just don't need another team. They already struggled to get the fan base going on the teams they have. Another team would not be able to be supported, and part of baseball is it's entertainment for the fans, and that's what makes money, and that's what makes teams be able to get better. And I just do not think that a third Florida team could sustain itself.
Yeah. So what do you think about the Rays wanting to play in Montreal? I don't think that's a good idea, but I mean, what do you think about that?
I would love to bring baseball back to Montreal. I think that's a really cool idea, but I just don't think that a team that's finally getting competitive again, that's finally starting to become a free agent destination. They made the playoffs last year. They took the Astros to 5 games. Uh, I think they're too good of a team. They're getting there to move them. And I think that if they play half of their games in Montreal and half of their games in Tampa Bay, they're going to have even more difficulty filling up the stadium because season ticket holders aren't going to want to buy season tickets because they're not going to want to have to go to Montreal, and they're not going to want to have to pay just as much for half the amount of games in Tampa. I think bringing baseball to Montreal is a good idea, but I just do not think that it's the Rays who should do it.
Yeah. So we're going to move on to the Yankees. In 2013, they signed Jacoby Ellsbury to a 7-year, $153 million deal. And just this past week, they released Jacoby Ellsbury, and they are deciding not to pay him the remaining $26 million left of his deal for, quote, using unapproved facility in Atlanta during his rehab. So first, how do you feel about them releasing him? Personally, I think it was the right move. He's been injured. And then second, what do you feel about them leaving out the $26 million left in the deal?
So them releasing Jacoby Ellsbury needed to happen, and it's good that it finally did happen. He was a great player for the Red Sox for a couple years. He came in second in MVP voting 1 year. I think that was in 2008, and he was a good player. He went to the Yankees, and he just couldn't repeat what he was able to do. He lost a step. He was one of the fastest players in the MLB, but with injuries, he slowed down considerably. He couldn't hit for contact or power anymore, and it was time for him to be out of the league. I don't know if he'll sign anywhere. He hasn't been healthy. The Yankees haven't had space for him, so that's adding to it. Maybe he'll find another place. Maybe he'll be able to be a good veteran's presence somewhere, but I think it's about time that he got the boot. I think another thing that we really have to look at that the Yankees saying that they're not going to pay him that $26 million. I think that's something they won't be able to do. I think Ellsbury is going to stand up. He stayed loyal to the Yankees. He could have demanded a release. He had that ability in his contract to demand a release, but he never did. He stayed loyal to the Yankees, which bothers me as a Red Sox fan because he didn't stay loyal to us, but that's not the point. I think he stayed loyal to the Yankees, and they're out here going to release him after giving him, was it a 7-year contract? Was it 10 or 7 years?
It was
And
7. Yeah.
it was a 7-year contract, and now
$153 million.
saying, we're not going to pay you the rest of it, even though you stayed loyal to us. I think that is not a good move. Jacoby Ellsbury is going to be able to stand up, bring that to the commissioner, and I think they're going to have to pay him at least half of that amount.
Yeah. So, final touch up on the Yankees, and then we'll move on to our last topic. It's nothing big. It's but maybe to some people, they hired Coach Rachel Balkovich, I think that's her name, and is believed to be the first woman to join an MLB organization as a full-time hitting instructor. So there's not much to say about it, but I thought that was an interesting little tidbit about that. So finally, we'll talk about the whole Astro situation. It's been all over everything baseball.
That's a change-up, in case you're wondering.
Yeah, that was a change-up. It's been all over baseball. Everyone's talked about it. If you don't know about it, you're probably not a baseball fan, honestly. Because, I mean, there's been almost nothing going on in MLB offseason news or all that. This has been the MLB offseason so far. So what do you think about this whole thing going on?
It's bad for baseball, man. It's bad for baseball. The Astros were a team that I felt that I could really quick, just so you know, I just got a notification that Travis d'Arnaud just signed with the Atlanta Braves for $16 million.
Wow.
So I just thought it was a 2-year deal for $16 million. So there goes that James McCann to the Braves thing idea.
Yeah.
Anyways, sorry.
No, you're fine. That was good.
Yeah. It's bad for baseball. The Astros were a team I felt I could pull for a couple years ago. Sports Illustrated put up a article that said, "You're 2016 World Series champions, Houston Astros," and that was when they were at the bottom of the league. They were the scum of the MLB, and now they're one of the best teams, homegrown talent. Aside from Verlander and Garrett Cole, but you see Jose Altuve and Carlos Correa and Yuli Gurriel and this homegrown talent, and it's something you could really appreciate. They had players like Carlos Beltran, who's one of the most just became the Mets manager not that long ago, but was one of the most liked players in the MLB. Now and now all of that things you could like about them, all of these players, all of these coaches are involved in a cheating scandal.
Yeah.
And that's a lot. That we see cheating scandals all the time in other sports, and you see sign stealing, and that's part of the baseball. But the fact that it's to that extent, using using electronics to steal signs, it's bad for baseball. I think Manfred needs to take this seriously and do something about it. I don't know if it needs to be suspensions for the coaches and players, but this reaches way past just the Astros too.
Yeah.
An article was released saying that that Alex Cora, the Red Sox current manager, who came in second in AL Manager of the Year just in 2018, he was apparently, him and Carlos Beltran, who I mentioned earlier, were two of the key people in the sign stealing dilemma, and it reaches far beyond the Astros, and it's a bad look for the MLB, and we need to do something about it. We need to crack down. They can't let that happen. It needs to stop.
Yeah, I apologize. For anyone who doesn't know what happened, the Astros have been alleged or have been said to have been using a camera in center field to zoom in on the opposing team's catchers' signs, and when they would catch on to what a changeup was, or maybe even any off speed, they would supposedly bang on a trash can twice or once, and then when it's a fastball, they don't bang on anything to let the hitter know that it was that a fastball's coming. There's been pictures released, and the walkway in between the dugout and the in between the dugout and the locker rooms, there's a TV set up with a bunch of wires and a Gatorade towels set up to block the view so no one can see. So obviously he said sign stealing. second base or pitchers tipping pitches, completely fine. It's a part of baseball. It's fine. But using a camera in center field is just not good for the sport. I at least respect AJ Hinch out of all of this, because AJ Hinch was at the forefront of saying that these allegations were bogus. He was laughing when people brought this up, and for this to come out now and for him to have done all of that, I at least respect him out of all of this, because he was kind of cocky about getting away with it.
You also got to look at, not only was he cocky about getting away with it, when there was allegations that the Yankees and Red Sox were involved in sign stealing in 2018, he shouted them out, and he was saying, that's bad for baseball. You can't be doing that.
Yeah.
And now he is in the forefront of having been caught. The Red Sox and Yankees, sure, they may have done it, but they weren't caught. And I'm not saying that it's okay that they did it because they didn't get caught, but AJ Hinch was giving them crap about it, screaming about it. He had heated encounters during interviews about it, and now his team is the one who has been caught and has been on national news lately.
Yeah, and it might be because the MLB's telling him not to say anything, but you do notice that in these years before, when when there was allegations of them doing things, he immediately he would have a press conference and say, no, we did not. And now that there's so much supporting that they did cheat, you don't hear from any of the Astros organization saying, no, it didn't happen. And again, this might be because the MLB is telling them to stay quiet, but you can't help but think that up until this, they were loud about not cheating, and now they're just not saying anything. So, yeah, it's not good for the sport. But another thing you have to think about is Carlos Beltran is now manager for the Mets, and Cora is the manager for the Red Sox. You can suspend Cora because he's still on the team that he cheated on. But can they suspend Cora and Beltran and hurt their now teams that weren't a part of the cheating? Can they hurt those teams?
Yeah, that's a difficult thing to look at, especially as a Red Sox fan. I'm someone, I really like Alex Cora. He's been very strong supporting his home country, Puerto Rico, and giving supplies and whatnot. And he led the Red Sox to a World Series, so I will always be appreciative of that. But seeing this, it hurts knowing that someone who, as a Red Sox fan, you trust, it has been part of such a bad scandal. And I don't want him to be suspended because that hurts my team. And he never did this with the Red Sox as far as I know. But how do I know he's not? How do we know he's not? It's difficult to know what to do. And I'm interested in seeing what Commissioner Manfred does with this. If he hands out punishments to players involved or whatnot. I am quite curious.
Yeah, there's one little last note that I want to bring up about this whole Astros thing. I've seen stats in 2016 of their hitting stats were bottom of the league, and then in 2017 their hitting stats were top of the league. Now you can't say this is because of players they drafted or brought in, but when you look at it, the stats prove that in 2016 they were a lot worse than 2017. Now, if that has to do with cameras stealing signs, I don't know, but that stat is just out there.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to look at, especially because you did see, like we mentioned earlier, the Red Sox struggling this year compared to last year. But that happens. Players struggle, but is that due to the cheating that occurred?
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see what the MLB does about it, because I don't think you can leave this. You can't. People bring up the Patriots thing in the NFL and how the NFL did not punish the Patriots or Belichick enough. It didn't hurt them at all. You can't do what the NFL did. The MLB has to have a really, really strict punishment that hopefully keeps this from happening in the future. So, anything else you want to bring upon this topic?
that's I just think it's bad for baseball, and I can't emphasize that enough. Um, and it bothers me to think that our the best sport in America, in my opinion, is being tarnished by something like this. And my question is Mike Fears, who was the one who kind of brought it to the attention, it's really quite something that he decided that, you know what, enough is enough. This can't happen, despite the fact that he was part of that team, and his performance may be tarnished because they also picked up sign steals, as far as stealing and bunting. They used the camera to pick up that as well, and his performance in the playoffs may be tarnished, but he just knows that this is what needed to happen. So
Yeah.
that's what he decided to do.
All right. Well, thank you guys for listening. This has been all the up-to-date MLB news that we have so far. This will be a weekly podcast. So, yeah, come back next week and learn about more MLB news. Thank you for listening to Turn 2 Podcast.